Welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
So we are, of course, on Parshat Balak, and we're well into the Parsha now. And Bilam has already shown Balak that he's not going to be able to accomplish what he wanted. And we're into a lot of poetry here. And when we got to the last verse yesterday in our previous lesson, I realized afterwards, as I was going over my notes, that I hadn't completed all the Rashis on this. So I'm going to finish this up and see what I can do. So this is the verse we actually had done. Lo hibit aven b'Yaakov. This is, again, sort of part of Bilam's prophecy and telling Balak the degree to which God was not going to allow him to curse the Israelites. So it says, he never saw any iniquity in Jacob, v'lo ra'a amal b'Yisrael, nor, again, parallelism, notice, and he did not see perversion in Israel, right? So that's Hebrew poetry, the parallelism there. Adonai Elohav imo, the Lord God is with him, utruat melech bo. So this word truah, in my previous lesson, I was having a hard time trying to see how I could translate that, because, of course, we use the word truah to describe one of the sounds of the shofar, right? So there was that sort of idea that was occurring to me. And then as I finished up the Rashi, I realized that it is from a word re'ut, with spelt this way, which means friendship. And there's a beautiful expression in the marriage service, in the wedding service, that talks about re'im ahuvim, loving friends, and that is what one tries to accomplish in that marriage relationship, for the two people to become loving friends. So Rashi explains this truat melech bo, and the friendship of the king is within him. So it means sort of we've got an in with God, you might say. And this is the Rashi we did not get done. Here we go. Utruat melech bo. By the way, notice how much Rashi there is. That's not necessarily typical of Rashi. And the reason is because of the poetry. And so it just demands more interpretation. So he says, Lashon chiba. This word truah has the connotation of affection. It's an expression of affection, vereut, again, friendship. So affection and friendship come more, and he gives an example. Samuel, second book of Samuel, chapter 15. It says, Rea David, right? He says, the friend of David. In other words, Ohev David, one who loved David. And then also in book of Judges, chapter 15, it says, V'yitneh l'mar'ehu, he gave it to his friend. So there's this word re'ah, which means a friend. V'chein again onkelos, and he says that again, onkelos here, the Aramaic translation goes well beyond simply a literal translation of the words. Very often, onkelos is giving here interpretations of what the poetry means. Ushchinat malkahon beinehom, and the presence of their king is amongst them. So, El Motziam Mitzrayim, it was God who brought them out from Egypt. Ketoafot Ra'em Lo is like the horns of a wild ox. So, of course, that expression, horns like a wild ox, is metaphoric. And of course, the question is, what's really the meaning of this metaphor? So let's say this, that from what I understand of the word ra'aim, right, this term, this animal called the ra'aim, is that it has beautiful, beautiful horns. So there's a beauty to its horns, but of course its horns are also a way of defending and attacking if necessary. And so what we're saying, I think we're trying to say, is that in this relationship with God, right, there is also the protection and the beauty of the Jewish people. And so that's why we're using this particular expression. So it's obviously gonna, again, as I said, it demands some exploration. El Motziam Mitzrayim, right? That God brought them out from Egypt. Ata amarta hine am yatzami Mitzrayim. right? He said, I think this is earlier on when Balak engages, when King Balak engages Bilam, that he says, the behold, this people that came out from Egypt. Lo yatzam atzmo. So Bilam is saying they didn't come out on by themselves, Elah Elohim Mitzvah, but the truth is that God actually brought them out. To our foot also now here we go into this expression like the horns of a wild ox is for him like the horns of the Re'am. And he says, Ketofek rum v'gavohu. So strength, rum v'gavoha, high and lofty strength, shelo, of his. V'chein, he gives an example from Job chapter 22. V'chesef to afot. Okay, let's see. Right. And it says, and the silver, I didn't look at the context here, but where it says silver shall be your strength, to me it sounds more like an ironic statement because we shouldn't put our trust obviously in silver and in money and in possessions. So I'm not sure what the context is here. It's obviously chapter 22 is pretty late in the book of Job, maybe middle to late part. So he says, Lashon ma'oz hema. These are expressions of power, of strength. But Omer Ani, so this is Rashi now, those rare occasions when Rashi states his own personal opinion. So he says, and I say, Shahu, he says, I think it's an expression, and this again, right, for off your faith, and birds to fly, right, to afot, right? Notice the same letters. So, and birds that fly, to fly. Ofef barom, because birds fly up in the heights. The gova, right? Again, another word for height. The upper parts and the heights. The tokef rav huzeh, and the fact that this bird is able, we think of an eagle, right? And the fact that it's able to see all this, see down, and he says, tokef rav huzeh. He says this ability to fly high is a great power to afot re'em, right? So again, the to afot re'em, afifat gova. So he's understanding re'em perhaps here, not so much in the sense of an animal, but maybe he says afifat gova means he to afot re'em, high flights on high on the heights. Davar acher, and another interpretation, another way to look at it, to afot re'em, this expression, you can see how it's not clear and how it just, we struggle to find a really good explanation. Tokef re'emim, right? He says it is the strength of re'emim. For Amru Rabotenu, so it's the power of re'emim. For Amru Rabotenu, and our rabbis have said, and this is in Tractate Gittin, page 68, Elu Hashedim. The re'emim refers to demons. So that again, sort of interesting and opens up, of course, a whole area of exploration as to what demons really are and to what degree. I mean, people really did believe in spirits that inhabited this world. We, of course, don't tend to believe in these sorts of things. And even if we don't believe in these sort of things, I do, if one takes more of a literary approach to things, you can see and you can understand that it's simply a way of explaining perhaps negative things that happen to people just unexplicably. And so generally, when I come across these kinds of statements that seem, not to be part of our way of looking at the world, I will look at sort of more the psychological background of them and what the psychological truth in these particular concepts. So going on. Okay. Ki lo nachash beYaakov, for there was no divination in Jacob. For lo kesem b'Israel. Again, you notice the parallelism, nor a spell in Israel. Ka'et ye'amer leYaakov. So this ka'et means, at a time, right? At a time, or like a time, it shall be said about Jacob. ula Yisrael, and to Israel, ma pa'al el, what has God wrought? What has God wrought? Okay. Let's go into here. Let's take it. Ki lo nachash beYaakov, ki re'uyim. That is, so why do they deserve this really close relationship with God? He says, ki re'uyim, they are worthy, they deserve, hem livracha, they are deserving of blessing, she'ein bahem menachashim v'kosmim, because it is not a Jew part of Jewish culture, Jewish experience to believe in diviners and wizards. That's not the way we approach it. We approach it rather through our belief in the divine creator, and that ultimately the world is controlled by this divine creator and not through magic, etc. And I want to point out that it's interesting that if you look carefully at one of the blessings before the Shema, Ma'ariv Aravim, one who brings evenings into existence, and it talks of Misader, Kochavim b'mishmor tehem. So, and he sets up the stars in the courses. And so, to the degree that there was a belief, and the Babylonians had a very firm belief in horoscopes, and we've mentioned this before, that there are cultures to this day that believe very, very much in this kind of, in our connection to the stars, and that the way in which they are, the Jewish approach to that, that if you do believe in this kind of thing, it still isn't the horoscope that determines your life. It's God, because God, as it says in this prayer, sets up the stars. So again, recognizing something that is of ultimate control with a capital U. So that's just to comment on wizards and diviners. It's not part of the way in which we approach life as Jews. Ka'et Ya'amer Yaakov, at that time it shall be said to Jacob, etc. Ud Atid, in the future, still in the future, Liot 8, to there be for there to be a time Ka'et Hazot, like this time, Asher Tiglech Chibatam La'ayin, where their love, and I think this is the love of God of the Jewish people, will be revealed to Galeh, will be revealed the eye to the eye. In other words, kol shehen yoshvin lefanav. All, I think here we could say to the degree that they reside or dwell or sit lefanav before him, velomdim Torah, and study Torah. So again, this is giving us a little bit of an insight as to how we value the study of Torah and the greatness of doing that, and how it instructs us as to how to live our lives. Mipiv, from his mouth, umechitzatam, and their compartments, lifnim mimalachei hasharet, and their commandments are actually within there. They come inside the minister. Those are the ministering angels. In other words, that the place of the Jewish people is actually in a deeper level and a closer level to God than even the ministering angels. Vehem yish'alu lahem, and the ministering angels will ask of the Jewish people, of the Israelites, ma pa'al zel, ma pa'al el, what has God wrought? V'zehu shenemar, and this is stated in Isaiah chapter 30, V'hayu einecha ro'ot et morecha, and your eyes will see your teacher. Davar acher, another interpretation, Ye'amer la Yaakov, will be said of Jacob, Eino lashon atid. We're going to not understand this as future, to not say, understand it as a imperfect sense, Ela lashon hoveh, but understand that it is the present, it represents the present. Einan tzrichim lemenachesh v'kosem. They do not require a diviner or a wizard, ki bechol et shetzarich lehe'amer leYaakov leYisrael, because at any time when it needs to be stated to Jacob and to Israel, ma pa'al HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what has God done, ve'uma gzerotav b'marom, and what are his edicts in the upper spheres, what are his divine edicts, celestial edicts, einan mechashav Nahashim v'kosmim. They don't have to divine, and they don't need to use magic, etc., etc. Ela ne'emar lahem, but it is stated to them al pi nevi'ehem, but it is told to them by their prophets, at the mouth of their prophets, ma he gzerat hamakom, what God has decreed, or Urim and Tumim, or they use the Urim and Tumim, which of course were the breastplate. They were found in the breastplate of Aaron, and uh, there are various theories. I think it's in Tractate Yoma in the Mishnah there where they discuss the Urim and the Tumim. So the word Urim is from the word or to mean light. Tum means the word complete. In other words, complete advice, complete knowledge, etc. And it was basically an oracle, right? So they use this oracle, Magidim Lahem, it tells them, and those, because the tribes were listed, each stone, there were 12 stones, and each of the tribes is listed. I think there was one letter that was missing, and I'm not sure if it was the letter Samach, but apparently the priests, the stones would light up, is how this worked, and the priests had the code of how to read the stones. But Onkelos lo turgenken, when Rashi mentions that Onkelos did not translate this in this way. So let's see if we can look at the Aramaic as best as I can, right? So Ke'idan Yitamar liYaakov Israel, at the appropriate time, it will be said to Jacob and to Israel, Me avad Elaha, what has God wrought? So he simply doesn't go into these other interpretations that Rashi has shared with us. Going on. Hein kalavi behold, a nation will rise up like a young lion, ucha'ari, and like a lion. Yitnasa, again, please note the parallelism. It will again, it has to do with go up, go on high, something like that. Lo yishkav ad yochal teref, he will not lie down until he has devoured the prey, the dam chalalim hishteh, and drunk the blood of the slain. So again, these kinds of statements to me, just scream out the need to interpret them in ways that aren't cruel or just one-sided, etc. I mean, clearly it is trying to describe the power, the ultimate power of the Jewish people. To my mind, in some ways, these statements are there to try and reassure the Jewish people who obviously have been oppressed for so many years, for millennia. After the destruction of the temple, especially, they were so oppressed, etc., that they needed encouragement, etc. And possibly these are saying, don't give up hope. That ultimately, it's things you're going to have the power that you may have once had, and to try and trust that God will make sure that the Jewish people survive and also actually thrive. So, I'd rather see enemies become friends and enemies regret whatever awful actions, but I don't believe in a Gott mit uns kind of, mentality. I feel that God is a God of justice and equity, and that every human being is created in the divine image. You've heard me say these sorts of things before. So when I come across these kinds of passages, I'd rather try to understand them simply as attempts to express in a very powerful way the ultimate, triumph in the best sense of whatever, understanding the term triumph as being overcoming your own, demons, etc., etc. So, hey, so let's take a look at the Rashi. Hein kalaviyakum. Behold, it is a nation that will arise like a young lion, etc. So here we go. Keshehem umdim Mishinatam Shachar. Look at this. It's so beautiful. When they get up from their sleep in the morning, a mitkabrim kalavi, they become strong. They're strong as a lion. And I think this is so human, right? That, wanting that extra hour's sleep or wanting that and not having to get up first thing in the morning. He's describing it, and this is part of the tradition as well, that it takes the strength of a lion to get up out of bed and get going, right? Kalavi uka'ari, like a young lion or like a lion, lachtof, lachtof et mitzvot, right? In other words, to grab hold onto the mitzvah, the commandments, lelbosh tzitzit. What are the first mitzvahs that you do? You put on your tzitzit, the likro, and to recite and Shema, to say the Shema, to v'lahaniach tefillin, and to put on your tefillin. So you have to do that before you do anything else in the day, and you need that power. And I love the fact that instead of seeing it in a negative kind of way, it's talking about overcoming one's own, you know, desires to just get more sleep. Lo yishkav, he will not lie down. Balayla, so lying down, right? At night, al mitato, on his bed, he doesn't go to sleep. In other words, achehu ochel umechabel et kol mazik haba letarfo. Okay, so interesting, because he's going to, literally it means because he eats, right? And he destroys kol mazik, anything that will harm him, haba letarf, I think it's the tarfor, right? To destroy him. What are we talking about? Ketzad, how this Kore et Shema, he recites the Shema al mitato, on his bed, umafkid rucho b'yad hamakom, and he puts his spirit in the hands of God. Ba machane v'gayis lahazikam, and if a encampment and a legion comes to injure them, Hakadosh Baruch Hu Shomram, the Holy One Besabihi guards them, V'nilcham milchamotahem, and he does their battle, Umapilam Chalalim, and he takes these invading people and he devours them. He Davaracher. And so look at how Rashi's trying to explain this metaphor. Davaracher, another interpretation. Hein am kalavi yakum, behold, a nation like a lion will arise, etc. And he says katargumor. So let's take a look and see if we can find that. Okay. Okay. Let's go back into here and take a look at the Targum. Okay. Ha'ama keleta share. So I believe this is, behold, he is, I think keleta does mean like a lion, will remain, right? Will reside. A nation will reside. Arya Yitnatal, and like again the Yitnatal I think means to take something. I'd have to double check the Aramaic here. Or like a lion, it shall seize, perhaps. Lo Yishrei Ba'ara, he will not remain Ba'ara in his land. Ada Yiktol Katol. Okay, so again, Yiktol Katol means he is destroyed, killed, literally it means, right? V'nichse amamaya yerat, and he has inherited the possessions of the people. So again, Onkelos is going into a more literal translation, but of course I love the interpretation that Rashi gives, and I love the fact that there it is. It's in the tradition to understand these things in a way that isn't so, negative, etc., and one-sided. But and Rashi just simply says, Onkelos didn't translate that way. Okay. V'dam chalalim yishteh, and he will drink the blood of those who are, let me find the place, the slain. Thank you. Okay. And b'midbar rabbah nitnabeh. So he prophesies, Bilam prophesies, she'ein Moshe met, that Moses wasn't going to die, ad she'apil nachei Midyan Chalalim, until he was able to overcome the kings of Midian who tried to destroy them, chalalim, all right, v'yehareg hu amamam, sorry, imahem shinemar. And so it means v'yehareg hu imahem means he will die. I think he will be killed with them. Shinemar. Oh, yes. Okay. And he's talking about the fact that Bilam, he's talking about himself. Bilam's talking about himself, right? And that he would be killed along with them. And we see that in Joshua, it mentions chapter 13, that Bilam ben Beor kosem hargu bnei Israel, right? Becherev el chalalehem. That's the verse in Joshua that mentions that Bilam himself, who had advised Balak to have those Moabite women fornicate with the Israelites, and there were many, many Israelites who died as a result of that. But it says there, and Bilam ben Beor, HaKosem, right, the wizard, Hargu b'nei Israel b'cherev, the Israelites killed with the sword, El Chalalehem, together with those who were, who were slain. So we'll stop here for now. I do want to mention that that statement is to be understood in some ways to have some irony attached to it, because of course Bilam was going to curse them and not have to use the sword. The whole idea is that Balak had seen that the normal way in which the Israelites overcame, right? That the enemies of the Israelites had tried to destroy them, it was unsuccessful. They couldn't use normal ways of combat and warfare, and that's why Balak wanted Bilam to use his mouth to curse the Jewish people and to kill them that way. And here it mentions how Bilam himself was killed by the sword. That's why it mentions killed by the sword. So, all right. So that's for today as far as the text is concerned. Any thoughts or questions or comments? I'm opening up to you for the
Yeah,
code. Yeah,
a
Laura.
couple. Now I already looked up Nahash because you're talking about divining, and I knew it to be
Yes,
snake.
it does have that
So
meaning. Yes,
yeah, it says that they think the word snake is just onomatopoeia,
yes,
and
that's
that
right.
they're
Sounds
not connected.
like hissing. Yes,
Yeah, they're not connected through definition, just through roots. But
right,
the other word was mazik
right,
that you it said for me it says harmful force that may
right,
seek.
right.
Well, is that related? That's mazik?
Yes, that's the Yiddish. The Yiddish has taken the Hebrew, although it uses an acute sense, right?
Yeah.
That, when you talk about a mazik, you're usually talking about a little boy who's
I know.
mischievous,
Yeah.
and it's understood in a much calmer kind of way. The Hebrew has a more serious connotation or denotation, whereas in Yiddish, it's sort of he's a little mazik. But they also, Yiddish is a language that does that, so that when you talk about a beautiful little girl or something, you refer to her as a miskite, and the word mis means ugly, but it's being used in a ironic way. Like you don't want to say she's beautiful because that could create problems. So even though miskite literally means ugly, it's meant as a compliment. Just the use of language. So, I don't know. Yeah. Okay.